Get 40% off your subscription to The Athletic for the best sports journalism online. Fantasy football is incredibly popular. Last season, over 7 million people participated in the Premier League's official game alone, along with hundreds of thousands of others who play across the variants found in British newspapers and online across the world. It's fun and it's simple, but it's under-evolved. And while recent innovations have added some gloss to the long-standing format, it remains primitive in comparison to its American cousins, which are more complex, more serious, and often much more absorbing as a result. Yes, fantasy football is a guilty pleasure for most of us and a very serious pursuit for others, but it can be better, and we have a few ideas as to how. A lot of fantasy teams feature the same core of elite players. With the new Premier League season soon to begin, the usual trends are appearing. 56% of the sides currently registered include Liverpool fullback Trent Alexander-Arnold. 43.7% have spent the £11.5 million required to sign Kevin De Bruyne. And 38.8% are hoping that Chelsea's Timo Werner enjoys a prolific start to life in English football. And of course, this year's fashionable budget option has already been identified too, with over 30% of users having picked Fulham's Alexander Mitrovic. It's natural. Those who play fantasy football pick in accordance with what is ultimately a very narrow scoring system. Its currencies are goals, assists, clean sheets, and appearances. But this is a habit encouraged by the way players are priced, on a scale from £4 million to £12 million. Not only do the league superstars cost too little, but the valuations are too generalised. Now, if that were to change, so too would the texture and complexity of the challenge. The official game has 15 spots to fill with a £100 million budget. With the most expensive players only costing £12 million, fantasy managers can afford to pick a star with very little sacrifice. For instance, selecting Mohamed Salah would leave 14 spots to fill and £88 million to spend, which is an average allowance of £6.3 million per player. In other words, a team of Kyle Walkers, Alissons, Tanguy Ndombeles and Jordan Ayew's, together a very able supporting cast for Salah and an easy decision to make. However, if the Egyptian were to cost £18 million instead, that average across the rest of the team would fall to £5.5 million. Your Kyle Walker is suddenly a David Luiz, your Alisson is a more risky Kasper Schmeichel, and your Ndombele and Ayew would be replaced by Jeffrey Schlupp and Patrick Bamford. Salah would look different in that light. No longer a reflexive must-have item to be shared among millions of different managers, but rather a luxury good commanding resources which might be better spent elsewhere and, crucially, in many more ways. It would create a different proposition. It would also, by way of variation between valuations, allow for a fantasy world in which there wasn't just £1 million difference between Phil Jones and Bukayo Saka, or $500,000 between Takumi Minamino and Wilfried Zaha. It would better reflect the sport, which is another area of traditional weakness. Historically, one of fantasy football's biggest issues has been its inability to reward certain types of player, the sort who are invaluable to their side but who lack the tangible production to be a virtual commodity. It's telling, for instance, that only 1.1% of registered users have selected Liverpool's Fabinho, or just that 2.7% have picked Chelsea's N'Golo Kante. It's the age-old problem: how to make the importance of the deeper-lying midfielders more commensurate with their actual function. Well, any solution has to respect an important reality. Fantasy football is a simple game, and that simplicity is a big part of its appeal. Complicated analytics and nebulous statistics are at odds with the culture and potentially prohibitive to mass participation. Any new metrics must be relatively easy to calculate so that fantasy managers can watch their points accumulate in real time. And it calls for a solution in three parts. Firstly, deep-lying midfielders would become their own positional category. Secondly, they would be awarded a single point for surpassing specific thresholds in the tackles completed, interceptions, and passing accuracy categories. And finally, those tallies would be subject to a multiplier determined by the game's outcome. 1 for a defeat, 2 for a draw, and 3 for a win. Then divide the total by the number of goals the team concedes, creating a rough sum for the generalised midfield contribution. As they are in real life, those players would not only become amongst the most valuable in the game, their selection would be vital, and as should be the picking of a manager. While some fantasy variations do include a spot for a head coach, it's unusual and in any case tends to privilege the select few by way of its scoring dynamic. Rewarding managers for victories or goals scored doesn't work. It just creates a pointlessly simple choice between the obvious 2 or 3 candidates. Instead, what if there was a more egalitarian dynamic, with managers earning points for their ability to actually change games? 6 points anytime one of their substitutes scored a goal, and under Tifo's rules, a hefty bonus for winning a game after being behind at half-time. Or, being creative, how about points as rewards for goals scored from corners and free kicks? Manchester City and Liverpool dominated that category as well last season, finishing joint top with 17 set-piece goals each, but Dean Smith, Eddie Howe and Steve Bruce would all have been assets too, thanks to their work on the training ground. The mechanics of the game are important, and so is chemistry within a side. If 2 players on the same fantasy team combine to score a goal, there should be a bonus on offer, and ultimately another way of checking the power of the big names. Goals from outside the box should also count double, clearly. And goalkeepers and defenders shouldn't just subsist on clean sheets, but earn points for crosses caught and clearances made. 1 for every 5, perhaps, and then 2 for every 10. Fantasy football does a lot right. It's easy to play, but impossible to master. And if nothing else, it will also always be a conversational icebreaker and reliable source of benign sporting small talk. Do you care who somebody else has got in their fantasy football team? No, probably not, but you might do if it were a little more descriptive and allowed a few more avenues for expression. With dedicated journalists for every Premier League team, hours of podcasts specific to your club, and hundreds of writers covering 10 other sports, The Athletic is the best place for sports journalism online. And you can now get 40% off an annual subscription, that's just £3 a month, to join Tifo at The Athletic. Thank you for watching today's video.